And within that first month, I made $32,000. It doesn't matter what we're selling. It's more important who the operators are. I don't know what no means. I just don't. That is not a word in my vocabulary. Had we had a business plan with that business, we would have never been able to be so nimble because we bolted on and tried so many different facets. When you're given a task, do it and it better be right, because there were 200 other people waiting that could take your place. So I learned a lot of those sort of skills from Gucci that dreaded day that I handed in my resignation. I got fed up and I said, bye. And I remember them saying, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to watch Sex and the City. It's playing in Midtown. Worse and worse. And then you have the big losses. We were given 48 hours, and that was like a loss of $75,000.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1, Wall Street to Y'all Street, Wealth to Wipeout. And wanted to give a quick intro to our first guest, Andrea Raitzer. I chose Andrea as my first guest for two reasons. First, I can't expect my guests to be transparent with their triumphs, but also with their failures, to share with fellow business people so we can all learn from it, without sharing my family's triumphs and failures, which are, with Andrea's case, just as much my triumphs and failures as they are hers. But this is given from her perspective. So in order to be fully transparent, you're going to see the highs and lows. The second reason I wanted Andrea to be my first guest is she's by far the most amazing person I've ever met. Small town girl, Wall Street success, entrepreneur, wife, mother of 3 children, and through the highs and the lows, took it all with grace. So you'll see from the episode why I chose Andrea. And I was so grateful, so grateful to her when I asked her to be my first guest, because she is a very private person. These are very intimate things that she is about to share with you. And she didn't bat an eye. She said, absolutely, I'll be your first guest. And so she was generous with her time to sit down with me for this lengthy interview. All of my interviews are long form podcast, unscripted. I do have notes to make sure I don't miss anything, key points, but all of my interviews will be unscripted, raw, authentic content from founders, executives, CEOs, seasoned operators that you can learn business lessons from. So I hope you get a lot from it. Shameless book plug. This book reminded me of a lot of my experience with Andrea. This is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It's an older book, a couple of years, but really one of my most favorite books. There is an affiliate link in the description that helps support the channel. Never thought I'd be doing that. I never thought I'd have my own podcast, but here we are. I love the quote at the top of the book says, the best book I read last year, Phil is a gifted storyteller. And that quote's by Warren Buffett. So Warren knows a few things. Seriously, this guy, Phil Knight, if you don't know, started Nike, started selling shoes out of the trunk of his car at running meetups. Didn't own a factory, imported the shoes. The story goes from there. The hills and valleys of Phil Knight and Shoe Dog. Excellent read. Please click to subscribe to the channel. It supports the channel. Never thought I'd be saying that either. It really does. It makes a difference. Please DM me on LinkedIn if you have any suggestions or guests, or better yet, put something in the comments and I will read it and reply in due course. Thank you so much. Please enjoy episode 1 from Wealth to Combat. Andrea Raitzer. Enjoy. Episode 1, Wealth to Wipeout. And my guest is Andrea Raitzer. Thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing some of what I know is difficult to discuss, but we learn from others' mistakes as well as others' triumphs. So sharing everything that you can is very much appreciated. Your story includes starting out in a very, very small town in Texas, fast forwarding to Wall Street success, luxury real estate rentals in Manhattan, working for Gucci Corporate after befriending the president of Gucci North America, starting your own business, a 7-figure exit, rolling it into another business, losing everything, including bankruptcy due to the pandemic and riots and all the effects that happened. And most people don't even live one of these chapters, let alone all the successive chapters. And you've since come back and you're doing more
and have further ambitions. And just to acknowledge during all that time, you were a mother of 3 children and my wife, my best friend for 30 years and my wife for the past 28. Before we get into the hills and valleys of being an entrepreneur, please share a little bit about your upbringing as a small town girl and what, if anything, gave you the itch to leave that and go out and do something different.
Sure. First of all, thank you. I see the list of your heavy hitters for interviews, so I'm honored to be the first because I know who you could have chosen. So thank you. Um, so I never grew up thinking I was going to be an entrepreneur. I can definitely tell you that my life's trajectory, my journey was crazy and nothing I could have ever predicted. I grew up in a very tiny town. I like to joke with people, population, cattle, and horses, greater than people. I never really had developed those really good social, interpersonal skills. I was more that awkward young person. I can genuinely say this. And I've had people from my youth say, "Oh, you were in a perpetual awkward phase." And I think that's kind of how I carried myself all the time, just knowing that I always felt like an awkward person, but knowing that if I just worked really, really hard at anything that I set my mind on doing, any goals that I had, that I could achieve. So I will tell you, I was extremely good at a few things when I was young, and it wasn't math. So I was a vocalist, I was an equestrian, and that was about what I was good at. And it was never the academics, but I worked really, really hard at those academics. So it was my vocals and my experience in that world where somebody had kind of thrown out the idea. They said, probably audition for Juilliard, the summer program, to try and you go to New York. And New York, whoa, I've heard that place is dangerous. And because I'm a small town girl, right? I went from Beadle, Texas to San Antonio, Texas, not so small anymore. But quite frankly, I worked my way in different jobs in my youth. And then in college is when I met yours truly. And I realized what true, and I really do mean this as a huge compliment. I was never academically brilliant, right? I was just a really gosh darn hard worker. And when I met you, I was faced with somebody that was so incredibly bright and so talented academically. And I remember joking with you and saying, "You make studying look like an art," because there is such a thing for people that are incredibly academically gifted. And
I think having said that though, I think we both learned over our 3 decades together um, that academics only get you so far, or book smarts, and that without street smarts, it's not going to happen, and vice versa, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so I really don't know that I got the itch to go to New York. Whereas I remember when I was completing college, getting an invitation to a master's program because it was going to be a new master's that was being offered at the university that we attended together. And we were married at that point because we were married my last year in college and your junior year in college. And then we found out we were pregnant. And so I remember in that moment thinking, okay, I don't know that two people going into a master's program while I'm pregnant and having children was going to be the best use of our resources. Because, that's what kind of happens in a marriage or some marriages where you want to work more as a team. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a team playing sort of let's work as a partnership. What will be best? And I knew with how driven you were, with where you wanted to go with your career, that I needed to pull back and sit out for a little bit so that I could make sure that I was more of the support system within the family to get you where you needed to go. And so I kind of took a role of, I like to say strategist, because I do feel like if I
Yeah,
had to say there's something I'm really, really good at, it's that I am quite the gifted strategist.
no, absolutely.
So what I did is, getting to know who's who, hooking people up together, being a connector, and that's honestly where I started to trust what I thought were lacking social skills.
Well, and I think we'll get into the importance of that and the millions of dollars you generated just by making connections. The connections you've made for us have been pivotal in every regard, all the way from which law school I got into and whatnot. And I don't want to get into details about me or as much as you, but I do want to salute you for the sacrifice you made, which so many partners make. Particularly, it falls upon women's shoulders often, more often than not, between motherhood and just being there, and then making that sacrifice and putting everything you have into the family. And so thank you. So, okay, small town girl, fast forward, we're moving to Manhattan. And so this is 2005 when we moved to Manhattan for permanence. And day one, you had to hit the ground running in luxury real estate rentals. And just to put this into context, this is pre-iPhone, right? If you're lucky, you printed a map out of MapQuest. We didn't live midtown or uptown where the grid is and things made sense. No, we decided to live in the financial district, old New York City, where it's windy roads and they're by names. And so talk to us about how that was and what you did to start to make out, out the gate tens of thousands of dollars a month. How did you
Sure.
do that?
So we had a discussion. What was I going to do once we got to New York? Because our kids were still little, and you were embarking on what was going to be a career on Wall Street with a world-renowned law firm. And I thought, you know what? I think I want to do real estate. Now, I'd like to say in deciding that, I never knew the type of real estate I would do in New York until I got kind of like a smack in the face as to what the ins and outs and the hierarchy of who's who in New York. But it is true what they say. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So I decided I would schedule my real estate classes to start the day after we got into New York City, because there was just no time to waste. There was no time just to sit around and say, "Oh, I just want to sightsee." You're like, no, we have to
Well,
make money.
we had no money.
We had no money.
We had been in school. Go ahead.
We'd sunk every penny that we had into deposits for the apartment, the movers, so we didn't have money to wash our clothes in the washing machine because we lived at 2 Gold, which is still there in Manhattan in the financial district. And I remember thinking we don't have the extra funds to go use the communal laundromat. So we were washing our clothes in the bathtub. And so I went to my classes, started them. I remember thinking, I'm getting on the subway alone. I'm going to have to just figure out how to get around, how to do this. And I did. And I remember going into the real estate classes, and then they dropped that big bomb and they said, "Who's your sponsor for when you go to take your exam? You're going to need a sponsor." I got a sponsor. Well, okay. And of course, anybody that knows who's a real estate agent or knows about that license, you have to have a broker that is willing to sponsor your license. You can take the exam. So I remember going home that after that first class and thinking, how am I going to find one? So the next day or so, I remember taking a break and I thought, I'm going to go to Corcoran. Like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing.
It's like, is Barbara here?
I'm here. So I walk in and they looked at me and they said, "Well, how can we help you?" And I said, "Well, I need a sponsor. I'm here." And I will say, whoever you were that I spoke to was probably one of the most gracious people I'd spoken to. I don't know who you are, but you did not make me feel bad I was perplexed, but I could have been made to feel like garbage. And whoever it was that spoke to me do that. But they said, here, we need a book of business to join our group. And I thought, a book of business? How am I going to get one of those? What's that? You know, um, so I was very naive. And the very gracious individual explained to me what exactly that was. And I just felt so forlorn. I just thought, what am I going to do? And I don't know, maybe it was a higher power, God watching out for me. I don't know. But as I was walking home and I'd gotten off the subway, I actually got off a stop too early. And I thought, oh, well, I'll use this as a chance to walk and kind of maybe learn a few of the streets. And I happened to see a shingle that was hanging for a real estate brokerage house. And it was a pitiful hole in the wall and in the financial district. And it was run by two young Israeli young guys. I can't even say men because they were young. They were young. And I walk in and it was like sort of like set up like those places where you see those trading little like cold wall trading floors where like just computer by computer by computer, just like a big open
Like a
room.
boiler room, they call it. Right?
Yeah. And I looked in, I thought, and of course I was greeted. They're like, hi, do you need a job? Are you looking for a job? So needless to say, I found my sponsor and I was just thrilled to be able to have a sponsor and here was the gig. And this is where I realized what it was that I had stumbled into. There's pecking order in the city when it comes to real estate. And that was, you had people that multi-million-dollar sales, real estate, and then you had $1 million sales, real estate. Then you had the outer boroughs, not Manhattan, but still better than where I was, which was rentals. But all I knew was that I could make money getting people to rent apartments. So I was all in. I was like, I don't care about a pecking order. I don't care how people see me. I just want to make money. And I went back, finished my class, and then I was off to take my exam. And the day that I took my exam, I remember walking into what was in a gigantic, huge auditorium room. And the first thing they asked me was, which language did you want to take the exam in? And I thought, which language? And she said, there are 26 languages.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my goodness. And I still remember to this day looking in and seeing all these different people, all these different cultures taking this exam.
Was that at Jacob Javits Convention Center? I can't remember.
I wish I remembered.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't remember.
No wonder.
But there were hundreds of people taking the exam.
Wow.
Took the exam, passed it, and then went to my first day of work at this hole in the wall real estate company.
Remind me, was this like a week after we moved to Manhattan, or was it?
I got my license after a week.
It was a week, right?
It was a week.
Wow.
It was we were hardcore.
Yeah.
We were like ride or die. Let's do this.
Well, because we drove in, and then the next morning you started your classes,
Yeah.
right? Remember?
Yes.
Wow, gosh. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where I was. Like, I was off, and I sat down for the first time, and then started getting handed clients, and that's when the real like fear began because they were handing me people that were interested in moving to the city, and we were all assigned districts, and I chose the financial district because the kids were so little. I wanted to make sure that I could get home if I needed to get home. So I started meeting people and going to these buildings. And the way that it worked at that time was you took a client to the city, to the building, and showed them any number of apartments. I think at that time, a 1-bedroom apartment in the city was like $2,500 a month. And if you happen to have a client sign on to rent an apartment, you got that 1 month. But then, of course, that was split 50-50 with the brokerage. So real fast, I got to understand how that money could add up if I was quick, if I was, hardworking, if I just beat the street. And within that first month, I made, I think, $32,000.
Yeah. Wow. That
And I
is,
thought,
I remember that.
yeah,
We thought, I mean, I was like, is this your cut? And you're like, this is our money. And it almost felt illegal because it was so much. We're going from literally 0 to 30K in our checking account. And that was transformative. So luxury real estate in Manhattan, obviously very high pressure, right? And so you talked a little bit about how you were able to have clients fed to you. The internet was a new thing back then, but the Israelis, they knew what they were doing. Those two young guys certainly knew what they were doing in marketing. And so they were able to get clients in. And you weren't dealing with the highest end luxury, rather, where they were buying multi-million-dollar condos. But you're still dealing with people who are well-to-do and could afford, I mean, $2,500 for a one-bedroom apartment in 2005 is a significant amount. How was it dealing, going from, again, small town, dealing with these people? Were these largely people coming from outside of New York City? Were these largely people who were, moving around, or how was that? How did you deal with it?
sure, I lied. Nobody knew I was a small town girl. Look, I'm not proud of it, but I kind of am, because growing up, nobody ever thought I was from South Texas. Everybody always asked me, are you from the East Coast? I swear to God. And I thought, that is so strange. So it was not difficult for me to lie my way through when I would meet people that were looking to rent, because they'd ask you, how long have you lived in the city? My whole life. It's like, what do you mean? I'm a New Yorker. I've lived here forever.
We're not condoning this behavior,
No,
but it is kind of fake
it
until you make
fake
it.
until you make it, man. I needed money. I
Fair.
needed to make money for my family. And so I would stay out late in the evenings as soon as the kids would go to bed, and I checked in on you, and I was learning those streets. I was learning my directions because, like you said before, the financial district wasn't set up like the rest of the city on a grid. It was like cobblestone streets that kind of jutted off in different directions. Very easy to get turned around. And the last thing you want when you tell a client that you live there your whole life and you don't know where you're going. The majority of people that I was dealing with were students that were coming in to live in the city, people that were throwing caution to the wind and deciding to follow their dreams, people that wanted to go from one apartment to another apartment. And then you'd pick up people along the way. So it was kind of interesting because you'd go to a building and you were showing people, and then somebody would see you and say, hey, can you show me an apartment too? It was kind of, at that time, it was kind of a free for all, because you have to remember the year that this was. New York was in a heyday. So New York, and there was money everywhere.
Yeah.
And people were happy, and the economy was great. And people were like, I felt privileged that I got to experience New York City at that time, right? And it was when I was in one of these luxury buildings that I kind of got my next gig without even knowing it. So I slowly but surely continued to make that money that I was making, able to talk my way into getting our son into one of the most prestigious Montessori's in Tribeca, Washington Market. How I did that, I'll never understand how I got that pulled off, but I did. But I was,
Well, let's stop there and talk about that, because I think it's a lesson in persistence. And so it's not per se business, but it shows how you can open doors that have been closed for a long time and break through, right? I don't want to say glass ceiling because it wasn't like a feminist thing, but you were able to pry open a door, and as soon as there was a small opening, you got through. So for context, for people who aren't familiar with Manhattan, there's very exclusive schools throughout that are private, and they are populated by extremely wealthy people, right? Largely, at that time, it was largely investment bankers and partners in law firms, very, very large law firms, independently wealthy people as well. So talk to us about how you were able to break into basically an exclusive club, that the tuition for that was over $30,000 a year.
it was.
And we're talking about someone pre-K. This is Montessori, right?
Yeah.
So in Iowa, Montessori for Michaela was like $1,200 a year.
Yeah.
And then we're going into this context. So we did the power of Montessori, but talk to us about how you opened that door and you were able to get in.
So I'm sure they were thinking I was a crazy person because so first of all, I think in discussing my personality, given the fact that I was not as academically strong and my entire childhood upbringing, young adult, was a lesson in persistence and working hard, which meant I don't know what no means. I just don't. That is not a word in my vocabulary. I just know that if somebody tells me no, it just means, okay, well, we're going to try again later. And so what ended up happening was I started doing some research about schools, on schools in the city, and started dialing, and nobody would call me back. But Washington Market had called me back to say, you left a message. Oh, well, there's a wait list for this school, but you can always send in an application. So I did. And I sent that application in when we were still in Iowa before we had even moved this. And I hadn't heard back. And I thought, well, that's odd. So I marched myself right over to the school. And I just said, hi, again, like, I'm Andrea and I want my son to go to school here. And I kid you not, the look on their face was sort of like, who are you? And I just said, I'm here. Like, my son would do great. I love your school. This is so awesome. And little did I know that several models sent there was Corcoran's grandmother or something had their grandson there. Like, this was a heavy hitting school with some very high level individuals. I even think like the CEO of this company, that company, you can't even imagine the names.
I mean, there were executives, I remember HBO.
Yes.
ESPN,
It was
the top level CEOs, and these guys making wonderful money, and then all the non-name people that no one ever knows about, the managing directors at the investment banks, the private equity guys, the quants. At that time, that was huge with hedge funds. They were all there, and no one knows who they are unless you're in that world.
I've come to realize later in my later years that I think because we're talking about me right now, but this is more us. I think that they let us in because we were like the real people. Like, we were like the poor people that were like, because even though you're making six figures in New York City, you're kind of poor, right?
Right.
Or not in the bubble. And so I brought with me just a level of realism that was probably refreshing. And they were like, this chick's going to keep us humble, right? And so I kept coming back. And finally, I think after a couple of weeks, I said, don't you guys have a summer program? And I think I wore them down. And they finally were like, okay, we'll let you in the summer program. And so what I ended up doing was volunteering every which way I could. And I had very little time because I was doing the real estate as well and trying to be a good wife and handle everything else. But I did. I was volunteering. I was helping. I was making sure that there were no issues. And we ended up getting a full-time slot. Our middle son got a full-time slot in that school, which was fantastic for him. But again, it was just, no, we don't have a slot. No, we don't. Okay, I'll come back next week. Okay, I'll come back a few days later, because I was absolutely determined to get into that school.
Yeah, I mean, and that was over the period of remember, months, and you were extremely frustrated because they kept telling you no, and it's something that you're not used to. You don't like hearing no, even to dating me. But
Yeah,
we'll leave that. We'll leave that out of it.
We'll leave the stalker
We'll
stories
leave the
out.
stalker stories out of it.
Because I did. I don't even know if it'd be legal.
Okay. Okay. So that was a bit of a segue. So you're doing the luxury real estate rentals. You get picked up by a developer. You develop a building, the Octagon on Roosevelt Island, and that was just pure recruitment because you were doing such a great job and leasing out so many of his units. So just doing more of what you were doing, excellence, right? Operational excellence. But from there, a natural progression, you end up on Fifth Avenue working in Gucci corporate at their U.S. headquarters, right? Of course. So talk about, how did you end up at Gucci corporate?
I, again, had been refining that social part of me that had been so lacking in my youth. And even to this day, I can say that I'm probably not the social butterfly that I should be. I definitely am the more quiet, reserved one. I guess I'm that creepy watcher. I like to think of myself as a cat. Like I'm one that kind of sits in the corner of the room watching what's going on. But I ended up at a birthday party, and in Manhattan at that time, birthday parties were not just a party for the hip, right? You had a party for just the kids without some adult beverages or things like that for the adults, then you were late. And so I remember having a couple of drinks and seeing this extremely beautiful woman that was 6 foot tall, dressed to the nines, just gorgeous. She was a model-esque. She looked like she had walked off a runway. And decided to chat with her and said, "Well, where do you work?" And she was very reserved, and she said, "Well, I work on at Gucci." And I said, "Oh, please work for like, gosh, no, that would be so cool." And she said, "Well, where do you work now?" And I said, "Well, I'm a real estate agent for real estate rentals."
What
And
was her reaction?
she was very gracious. She was always extremely gracious and in interacting with her. And I just was just bubbly and just excited to learn about her. And I just, wow, I would just love a chance, to see if I could apply there, right? I was talking to her as if we were equal, and we were not equal. Okay. And I'm not saying I'm saying as career wise,
Sure,
we
sure.
were not equal. And I didn't know that at that time. So right before leaving that party, she hands me, she didn't forget because we'd already kind of separated and we were talking to different people. And she handed me her business card. But I had always been taught, you learn a lot of things in New York. You don't sit there and Google somebody's business card in front of them.
Yeah.
You put, well, thank you very
And
much.
discreet.
And you discreetly put it away.
So real quick, that level of professionalism, did you find, because that is professionalism, right? A lot of people are like, oh, we should get together. Oh, we should do this. And then they don't follow up. That level of professionalism and etiquette, did you find that to be commonplace among this kind of crowd or like how?
It was commonplace for them. It wasn't for me. I had to learn fast. I just feel like the moment I hit the ground in New York, I was thrust into the deep end of you learn how to conduct yourself appropriately, or you're not going to find yourself in the social circles where you can meet the right kind of people or meet the people that would be willing to help. Because, look, let's be real. And a lot of people don't understand this. New York City, Manhattan, there is a level of discrimination, but it's not the kind of discrimination you think. It is, or at the time was very financial based. But it's for a reason, right? Because you don't want to be at one level trying to hang with this level, and then you just can't keep up. And then you end up getting into trouble. You end up getting into financial trouble because you got the keeping up with the Joneses sort of
Right.
thing. And then you're in debt and everything else. So
They're almost doing you a favor.
they're almost doing you a favor. And you'll find, I did find that a lot. Like there were people that would, the Hampton people and everything else that one of the first questions that you'll be asked in New York City is, well, what do you do? And I used to get offended by that until I realized why they were asking that. It was, okay, look, I'm pressed for time. I have very limited social vacancies in my calendar. I need to make sure that the people that I'm interacting with can either help me or do something for me or abuse. That's just the way it is. And I found that saying my husband was a lawyer opened a lot of doors. And we maybe could not run with the Hamptons crowd, but somehow we always got that invitation because it's always great to have a lawyer around.
Yeah,
right?
people are very gracious and open and, grateful for all that we learned. But I interrupted you. So going back to
That's okay.
being handed a business card by this
Yes.
person.
So I went home that evening and I did the very discreet thank you so much, put the card in my pocket and went home. And I, was just talking, because you happened to be home. And I rarely got to talk to you. You were always so busy. And so I was talking your ear off. And I remember saying, oh my gosh, you'll never believe it. It's a beautiful woman. She's tall. She looked like a model. And I told her she worked for Gucci. And I was just talking a million miles a minute. And you said, well, who was she? And I said, oh my gosh, you know what? I have her business card. Hold on one second. And I grabbed the business card and I gave it directly to you because I was cleaning the kitchen. I don't know what I was doing. And I heard you gasp. And you said, oh my God. And I said, what? And you said, you know who this is? And I said, yeah, she's a beautiful woman that was at Washington Market. Her kids go to school there. And you said, Andrea, this card is for the president of Gucci North America. And I was like, oh, what? Like,
You didn't believe me. You said, give me that.
I was like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
And I looked at it and immediately I felt so small because I remembered the conversation with her. And then you really realize just how gracious she had been. But I didn't, I was like, okay, well, she gave me the card. That means she wants me to contact her. So the next day I contacted her and I said, hi, this is Andrea. I'd like to take you up on coming, like reaching out to you, coming in, seeing if, there's anything at Gucci I might be able to be a part of. And she said, okay. A week later, I walked in there. I walked into Gucci on Fifth Avenue in 9 West shoes. That cost me
The horror. Oh my gosh.
horror.
What were you thinking?
I'm telling you, I think my shoes at that time, my 9 West shoes were like $49.99. And everybody dressed in that building was dressed in that Gucci. I was just excited to be there. And so they placed me in a position as a store planning department assistant. And I really kind of, again, hit the jackpot with the timing because they were working on moving the Gucci from the flagship Gucci on Fifth Avenue from the location it had been at into Trump Tower. And they desperately needed an assistant. As the assistant, I was in charge of like the punch list in the building. And if anything went wrong in any of the Gucci North America stores, an earthquake hit, something that I would help coordinate different things to be done. But I was really lucky because I was on the Trump team and I got to see that incredible store built from concrete to the gorgeousness that it is today. And that's also where I met then Mr. Trump, now our President Trump. And that was an incredible experience. I was able to go to Madonna's Malawi party at the UN. I actually washed my hands with Demi Moore in the bathroom.
Not many people could say that.
Yeah, so
that's special.
So got to do a lot of fun things, but again, never losing sight of the fact that everything that I did as strategically as possible and with intent and always kind of thinking forward motion, like how could I use this to springboard to something else?
So Daniela Vitali saw promise in you, gave you an opportunity, placed you, and placed you in a position where you would have a tremendous amount of experience. So what did you learn from, Gucci is built on excellence, right? Everything from the door handles you had to order and import from Italy to the light fixtures to everything. I mean, it was amazing the work that you had to do and the level of detail that goes into just one store. Something has to be fixed or built out, let alone the flagship, the North American flagship in this skyscraper on Fifth Avenue. What did you learn about operational excellence from Gucci that you can share?
When you're given a task, do it and it better be right. Because there were 200 other people waiting that could take their place. And I remember being given tasks, and the tasks needed to be done immediately. And so the task needed to be done immediately and correctly. And everything was timed. So there was no sort of like, oh, I'll get to that tomorrow. No, it was they give you a task, you take care of it immediately, and you learn how to manage your time. And I learned a lot. I also learned just about managing email and managing those sort of lists of what needed to be done first, second, what was sort of emergent, what was non-emergent. So I learned a lot of those sort of skills from Gucci because believe me, everything was timing there. Everything had a deadline. Everything had a budget that had to be met. So it taught me a lot about it.
I recall the reason the timing was so critical. First of all, is you have a lease starting and you only get so much time. And I don't care what REIT or real estate owner it is, landlords want rent. The other factor is you have some really tough contractors you dealt with. I remember the stories you would come home and tell me. What did you learn about negotiations from watching, I think it was Doug and the other, your bosses essentially, how they negotiated with these tough contractors and these tough real estate owners, landlords?
Yeah, that was amazing. So I was in rooms with the Trump team, the lawyers, Gucci's lawyer, the contractors from Italy, the contractors from New York City, the directors and I remember that the director that was in charge was so calm and eloquent. And I think that was one of the most amazing things that I witnessed. Yeah, I remember one meeting, they were over budget in the millions. And that, the director at one point looked at the contractors and said, there is no more money. There's no more money. So you're going to have to fix whatever this problem is, and we're going to have to move on. And so I think that was amazing to get to witness that sort of negotiation in which you have millions of dollars on the line and what it took to say, no, you're not getting any more money. Like so I think I learned some of my edge from that and not being afraid to sort of put my foot down when in the future when I had my own business.
Yeah, no, I think a word people often don't use enough in business, and I've seen this even in my law practice, is no.
Mhm.
No. Walking away sometimes is the most powerful tool. And you never want to not do a deal, right? If it's a good deal, but a good deal can be a bad deal if the economics don't work. And so being able to say no and mean it, right? That's very powerful. Thank you. That's very, very powerful. So just finishing up, kind of the theme here is, you've been recruited several times. You were recruited multiple times. You had just come off of, this happened in the short span of a couple of years. What do you think people saw in you that you didn't see in yourself?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. What's always perplexed me, because it's been a very common theme with some things that I would hear about myself. I remember people saying to me, you don't see what I see when you walk into a room, or you tend to draw attention. People look at you when they walk into the room, when you walk into the room. And I always thought, well, that's kind of creepy. And then some people would tell me, you just have a presence about you that's strong. And I think what it is that there's a possible quiet strength that I have that, and I'm just going to pick up our dog because our dog is like pining away for attention here.
This is one of two.
Let's just give her attention.
Okay.
Poor thing.
By the way, we are in our house right now,
We are.
filming this in our house.
Yeah.
So
We'll
yes,
roll
maybe
here.
we'll join us later.
Yeah.
But, okay, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. So I think what I didn't know then was that I do have sort of that quiet strength that when people are around me, when they're with me, they just sort of feel like I'm strong enough to get the job done, that I'm savvy enough to solve problems. But I think that's something I never saw in myself when I was younger. I was always that awkward person. I was so awkward. It wasn't until I embraced that quiet strength that I had. Maybe I should lean on this a little bit more, that I started to sort of feel more confident in my ability to direct, to team build, to negotiate. But I had to start embracing that part of myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one of the things our educational system doesn't teach is confidence. Maybe you get it a little from sports and stuff, but largely risk taking is told to be avoided. And so I feel like you were put in several situations where it was almost like a pressure cooker making a diamond, right? From us having limited to no resources. Of course, Fred's here. Hi, Fred. Limited to no resources, to where you literally were generating 30 grand a month and networking for us. And I'm toiling away at the firm after I have the bar and whatnot. And so there's a lot to be said about navigating these obstacles and knowing inside you that you can get it done. Really, there's no difference between a multimillionaire, a billionaire, right? And just some regular guy, except they took the risk. They maybe had a little more knowledge. A lot of times, the guys and gals I met who were mainly the billionaires, they figured stuff out on their own. It wasn't handed to them. Yeah, I mean, that was my kind of experience. So, okay, so Gucci, you got fed up because they had these corporate parameters and weren't going to promote you. I don't want to go into all that, but you were basically like, I'm out. I'm going to watch Sex and the City. Send me my last paycheck.
Yeah,
right?
Sex and the City had opened that day. That dreaded day that I handed in my resignation. And I did. I got fed up and I said bye. And I remember them saying, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to watch Sex and the City. It's playing in Midtown." And they were like, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Yeah." And then I walked out again. One of those not so proud moments. But I'm going to say this with all honesty and transparency. Your typical entrepreneurs are not good employees. And I just didn't know that at the time. And when you think about it, having been a real estate agent for rentals, I wasn't an employee. I was my own business person. I chose when I got up and out to work. I chose the people that I wanted to work with. I chose how many buildings I wanted to go to. I chose how late I worked. I chose whether or not I took a lunch. So in all of that, you take that and then I decide, oh, I'm gonna go work for Gucci now, which was a corporate entity, and now I'm under somebody else's thumb. You can't do this. You can't do that. Maybe do this. Don't talk to that person. Don't go to that office floor. Don't. And it was kind of like a disaster in the making. I should know it.
Yeah, and in all fairness, and understanding what you did, you didn't just flippantly quit and say I'm out and abandon them. Your boss loved you so much, he didn't want you to get promoted to go to a different department, and he blocked you because of some stupid corporate rule on timing. So
it was an experience, and I didn't know that I was well on my way back into an entrepreneur world.
So just kind of want to fast forward. So from Gucci Corporate, you left, Occupy Wall Street happened. We lived on Wall and Broad. It was right in front of us. We didn't like walking the kids to school in Tribeca with all of that going on. So we decided to move out of the city, and the financial crisis came upon us. And there was a lot of turmoil during that time. And from that, though, was the birth of your first business that you started with. I think it was $7,000 the first month that was on the Amex for supplies and whatnot. And you were able to, well, you tell the story. What happened?
Sure. So we, at that time, had bought a home out in the country, and a hurricane had come through and had knocked out power and everything else. And I think that we'd gotten trapped in the house for like 2 weeks. And obviously the mail hadn't been getting delivered. So you were home and you hear a knock at the door, and it was the mail lady, the mail carrier. And she had in her possession, unbeknownst to me, because you answered the door, about 12 of my 20 subscription box services that I had become addicted to. And for anybody that doesn't know what a subscription box is, it was sort of like that big craze that happened for a number of years in which companies would curate these packages and then charge you a monthly fee, and then you got this like recurring box every month. And so, for example, Birchbox was one of them. Glam Box. There were ones that were for home goods. There were ones that were for food. There were ones that were for, and so I remember you saying, Andrea, what is all this? And I sitting at the table knitting, because that was another one of my hobbies and passions was knitting. And I said, well, those are all my subscription box service. And you were like, I remember you sitting there looking at them, and you started to open them, which I was very upset about, because I was like, hey, those are my surprises, every month. And how dare you? And you said, I don't see anything here for yarn. And
Well, and just for context, your yarn, it wasn't $3 ball Walmart yarn. We're talking about $30 balls of high-end yarn that you would use.
yes. And so I said, there isn't one for yarn. And you didn't respond very quickly at that time. And I just kind of went along my own business. And I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and you were downstairs still looking through these boxes. I thought, heck is going on, So I got some tea, went back up to bed, because I learned that about just kind of let you be. I didn't know if you were really upset because I got the fear boxes. How much money did you spend on them? But I remember that by the morning time, I came down and you had this idea and you pitched it to me. And you said, would you want to open your business? But because I remember telling you I wanted to go into business, I wanted to be my own boss. I was frustrated with the whole experience I'd had going from real estate to a corporate job and then back to stay-at-home mom. And I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what to do. And so you said, why don't you do this subscription box service, but with yarn? And I thought, well, that's kind of brilliant. Yeah. And so I think that for 48 hours, we kind of had like a jam session, and we were like, what would we call it? What would we do? And what would it be? And so what ended up happening is we named it KnitCrate, KNITCRATE. And we decided that we were going to curate these by contacting yarn, either indie yarn dyers, which are independent yarn dyers, not corporate, or luxury yarn vendors, pair them with knitwear designers that we would contact for unique or proprietary knitting designs. And so, we were working through that and kind of trying to figure that whole thing out. And we had to pitch it though. And we didn't really know how to do that. And so in all the research, we realized that unlike today, and this was what was very unique about this industry, is that this particular industry, the fiber arts industry, had its own crazy bubble of a world, which was named Ravelry. And it's sort of like the Facebook for yarn.
And did you know about this platform before you started getting into this, or was this part of the research?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know about it. This is part of the research.
And how many knitting projects had you completed at this point?
Well, that was one of the things that when we were talking about it, you said, we could do this. You could do this. Like, I'll help you. You of course were like, I'll help you, this, that, and the other. And I said, I remember looking at you and saying, but Joe, I haven't ever completed one knitting project. You're like, what are you talking about? I said, I think I've had a perpetual scarf for like years, you said, I remember you said, well, then learn, finish something. And I thought, so I ended up actually going and getting certified at the New York Fashion Institute
Yeah.
knitwear. And I
Fashion Institute of Technology, I think.
the Fashion Institute in New York.
Yeah.
And I went and bought every knitwear book there was and learned and voraciously just learned everything I could about the knitting world. And, just as an example, at the time that I started knitting, I maybe could sit for 30 minutes and knit. By the end of it, I could sit in a clinic for 3 days straight, 12 hours a day, and knit and have a finished project at the end of that. And so that is how voracious I was about inhaling this, because I thought, okay, if this is going to be a business, you can't have an owner that doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And it was an industry I loved, so I didn't mind like learning. I thought, okay, well, I literally poured myself into this world. Everything I could. I figured out everything I could, deciphered, because if you've ever looked at a knitting pattern, different language altogether. It's a different language, and it's complicated. But I had the right temperament, because anybody that knows any knitters, they're type A. I don't care who you are out there, you're type A. And you have to have a level of patience and persistence that is almost, masochistic in nature.
So how do you take $7,000 and you have no manufacturing capability, you have no design team, you have no social media team, yet you create a business that you literally pull millions of dollars out of over 3 years and then have a 7-figure exit? How do you do that?
I'm going to be very honest about this. I wish we're just shooting from our hip, moving into whatever part of that industry we could, partnering with whoever we could. Your typical person is going to say, well, you better have a business plan for that. Had I had a business plan for that company, I never would have grown, ever, because I had to be so nimble. And I will tell you that the first sort of like post that I put out there into the Ravelry universe was met with so much hate.
And that post, just to be clear, was the idea for the business.
It was the idea.
Hey guys, what do you think about this?
Yeah. And so we thought, oh, okay, well, we need to post something somewhere. And I just say we, because you were my like sounding board. And
We needed a focus group, but we didn't know any knitters.
We didn't know any
Right.
knitters. And any knitter you did know, they were super opinionated. You got more opinions than you wanted, right? And so I remember thinking, okay, let me just post something on Ravelry, and I'll say, oh, I'm interested in doing this. What do you guys think? The level of hate that I got was insane. And I'm talking about hundreds of posts of people saying, you're stupid, you're crazy, nobody will ever buy that. Why would I do that? I'd just rather go to my local, knitting store, blah, 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 blah. And I remember being so sad about it, because I thought, wow, I really thought it was a good idea. So I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to start pitching to vendors that own yarn, that import yarn. And I started picking up the phone and calling them. And I got a lot of rejection. People, what are you talking about? That's not anything I want to be a part of. That'll never work. So I think it was like number 13 or 14 that I called, and I finally got some positive feedback, which was Nadine Curtis, who was the owner of a yarn company that imported mohair yarn from South Africa.
Right. Okay.
And she was very much an out-of-the-box thinker.
California.
A Californian, and very creative, very open to trying different things. And I remember the spiel, I keep saying, feel bad, I keep saying I remember, but I do, I remember that
It's going back.
it's going back, you know, and I'm thinking about this, that I remember saying, I think this is brilliant.
Validation.
And she honestly helped me refine the strategy a little bit because she knew a knitwear designer that worked exclusively with her yarn. And his name was Stephen or Stevie B or
Stephen
B.
B.
Stephen B.
Right.
Very brilliant knitwear designer. And he had all these beautiful patterns that he would do up in her yarn. Very, very kind man. And she said, you know what? Let me pull Stephen in and see if he would be willing to come up with a pattern that would be exclusive with whatever you decide you want to use with her yarn. And so at the end of that project, and these were going to be monthly boxes that were going to go out, how we pulled this off, I have no clue because the level of work that went into curating these projects was insane.
Yeah.
But what we decided in the end was that she was going to have exclusive colors dyed for this particular project. And Stephen was going to come up with an exclusive project using only those exclusive colors. And we were going to actually buy everything wholesale. And then we were going to put those in a package and ship them off to anybody that subscribed. And that was the very first package that we sent out. And what's really amazing is that the first month of projects, I believe 67 people signed up to receive these projects. And if you looked at the last month that we had that company where we were sending out projects, I think that we were sending like 5,000 of those out per month. Like it's just insane.
It was insane. And the inception of what Nadine Curtis did for us with Stephen, because of their reputation in the industry, I remember, they validated the idea. And because they worked with us, we had the ability to have other designers and approach them. And you're right. I mean, I think our last 12 months of owning that company, we shipped 7.2 tons of yarn to a customer base in 19 countries.
That is correct.
So that business you sold for 7 figures, or we sold for 7 figures, and it was barely 3.5 years that we owned it. Last question on KnitCrate. What do you think that you did right from the outset that maybe other founders don't do?
Something I did right on the outset.
Yes.
I tried to create something very much proprietary.
Okay.
And that was because I didn't want it to be easily replicated. However, it did not take long before somebody came out of the woodwork. And I think this is an interesting part of the story for anybody that is developing a business because I hear it over and over again. People that say, well, I don't want to do this business because somebody could just, they could just copy it. Yeah, pretty much a lot of businesses. If you can't have some form of a proprietary nature to your business, that's going to happen. And even when you do have a proprietary nature of the business, conceptually, it can be copied. And that's something that happened to me was that it took maybe 3 months in for somebody to come out of the woodwork to copy the entire concept. And I'll tell you exactly how it happened, which was crazy, is that we had gotten traction. Every month, it seemed like in the beginning, the number of packages we were sending out would double. So like the first month was 67. The next month was, double that. The next month was double that. And what we realized was that there were a number of yarn store owners that were signing on to this project because it was giving them creative juice for things that they could do in their store. So sure enough, there was a yarn owner that had subscribed to the package. And it just so happened that the day that her package arrived at the store, her yarn sort of distributor guy that worked for
Yarn rep, I think.
yarn rep. Yeah, thank you. Her yarn rep happened to be coming in for an appointment with her that day to show her all the latest yarns, and was like, "What is that?" And she said, "Oh, it's a new company, and they curate these packages." Well, it took him like a hot second. I think within a week, I found out he quit his job, took out his life savings, and created an alternatively named subscription box service, and then went head to head. And we literally competed with him until the day we sold that company. He eventually went out of business because he handed that business over to a family member or something. But we had very little time. They talk about those businesses that have that like upward trajectory where they're just rubbing, and they get like this head start with the business. We had very little head start before somebody copied it, but we were successful nonetheless.
Yes. No. One more question, kind of fast forwarding to the exit of KnitCrate. So 7-figure exit, money hits the account. A lot of money hits the account. Did that feel like freedom to you, or did it feel like pressure to do it again? What was, what happens? Like, you get an exit. What happens?
Well, I think before I kind of talk about that, in order to really understand it, in that last year that I had the business, we talk about how I never followed a business plan. And I followed a business plan, I wouldn't have been successful. We were always bolting different things on, right? Always trying to make more. How can we make more money out of the business? How can we make the business grow? And so as the business was growing, being featured in Vogue Knitting International, which we were,
Entrepreneur
magazine,
Yeah.
bolting on a store, an internet store, that bolted on, oh, hey, maybe I can dye my own yarn and have my own yarn company. That.
Yep.
Maybe I could have, so bolted on. So I don't think there was ever a second that I wasn't working on this business. It consumed. And I think until the very last day, I lived and breathed this company. And it was all I knew. Every second of the day was tied up to it. So in selling the business, I thought it was going to feel like freedom, but it didn't. It felt like this money came in, and then you really realize, okay, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do? Again, an entrepreneur mindset. I can't go work for somebody else. I know that's not going to work. I will fail at that. So taking a break and kind of trying to.
Well, we took a break for, I think, 7 days. I think it was 7 days. But I do want to add context. Something that we glossed over, or I glossed over, is when KnitCrate was started, when you started working on it full time, and when I was helping a little bit, in that period was the financial crisis. A couple of years post-financial crisis, I had survived 14 rounds of layoffs at my law firm, and my number came up. I was let go. And we had an $8,000 mortgage. We had our property taxes were like $26,000 a year. We had 3 children. We had obligations. And so this business was born out of necessity. It was at a time when no one was looking for M&A corporate capital markets attorneys, right? No one was hiring. The train stations were empty, literally. And it was either make this work or, I don't know, we would have lost everything. So I think we took 7 days off.
We did.
And I want to get into the next business, the business that ultimately became a national retail company doing several $1 million in sales a year, was pre-COVID set up for tremendous partnerships with some of the biggest companies in the world. We had some really serious stuff in the fire. Walk us through birth and the rise and the fall and the ultimate bankruptcy of Steepologie.
So we were sitting and thinking, what are we going to do? This money isn't going to last forever, although it was a hefty amount of money. You can't stop there, not at the age that we were at. And we were too rambunctious. I was bored. You were bored.
Yeah.
And so we started to think about what interested us in all of that, in all of our experiences. And we used to put tea in some of the packages with KnitCrate. And you had asked me, if you had to choose another industry to go into, what would it be? Now, at that time, a number of interesting things were kind of coming to a head. When our youngest was born, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And it was a battle for me because you have all these symptoms and these issues that are happening to you, and you don't quite know that it's real. And all the medications that they're giving you are so poisonous. And, there are honestly some of the lighter cancer drugs, some of the ones that they give. And I had gone into this sort of like holistic part of my journey with the autoimmune disease that I have. And tea became a big part of my life. And I remember feeling very disappointed when I'd walked into a Tiavana because I'd walked in.
And just for context, because Tiavana is no longer with us.
Right.
They were a large, several hundred stores. I think it was 400 or 500 stores, national, international, ultimately purchased by Starbucks. And so very, very large, well-established tea chain that was in business when we started it, but you're doing before that. So just so people know what Tijuana is.
Sure.
Or was.
I remember wanting to go and get some tea, just, some anti-inflammatory tea, something very, holistic. And I went to a Tijuana in the mall. Warren, our youngest, was in a stroller, very little. And it was one of those quiet moments when he was napping. And I walk in and right away, they have the samples at the entrance. Here, drink this, try that. Do you want to buy that? And I remember really getting sucked into this immediate buying process when I was there, right? It was like, you should get this and you should get this. And we'll mix it with that. And we can mix it with this. And this is our exclusive. And I mean, you have to buy it in a pound. I had no idea what a pound of tea yielded. I had no idea anything about what I was buying. All I knew was that Warren was waking up. He was screaming. I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to buy. And I just kept saying yes, right? I was like, yes, okay, sure. Yeah, yes. Because in my mind, I thought, well, how can it be any more expensive than a grocery store, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going up into the register and they said, okay, well, that'll be, $275. And I was like, what? I thought maybe, I don't know. I thought maybe like person next to me bill got combined with my bill. And I thought, what in the hell did I just buy? And they said to me, we've already mixed these teas. And if you don't purchase them, we'll have to call security. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And Warren was having a full on fit at this point. So I handed over my American Express and I just said, well, I hope but just kind of goes through because, even though we had the money we had, we were still on a budget. And so you saw that charge and you immediately called me. You're like, what is this charge? Like, what did you buy? And I got home and I laid everything out. I said, I don't know what I bought, but I bought a bunch of tea. And so that was sort of like one of my experiences with tea. So I sort of connected that when you had asked me what was one of the things that would interest you in doing next. And I remembered that experience. I remembered that experience being so awful. So I said to you, I would love to like open a tea store, but it be done in more of an educational fashion. And so we tore apart the study in our house at the time and created a mock store. Like, what would we want our tea store to look like? And I think we changed it up like 6, 7, 8 times. And we got canisters and how would we package it? What would the labels look like? And what would the scoops be like? And what would we scoop it into? And what would we weigh it with? And what would we, on and on and on and on. And again, this is like another one of those, well, we don't know that much about tea. Bought every book I could on tea, learning and absorbing everything. Now, talk about a world that was just like the knitting world, except on steroid, right? With the snobbery and the you know, j- being intelligent about what tea is this and
Tea connoisseurs,
tea
tea snobs.
connoisseurs and the tea processes and the
But also, again, for context, it was done in a manner with heavy research because in looking at it, tea is the second most consumed beverage in the world, only behind water, right? And then when you look at the billions of dollars Teavana was making and the market growth, and at the time we lived in Issaquah, right outside of Seattle, and it's like, what better place to open a tea company, right?
yeah,
Than Starbucks' backyard.
yeah. So we created the perfect tea store and started pinching to different landlords. And there was this one store, empty space that was in downtown Seattle. And I remember we made an appointment, went, pitched the idea, and thinking it was so strange because the development group that we were pitching to really didn't ask a whole lot about the business and was more interested in us as a couple and what our history was, which I thought was really odd. And I remember after the third meeting thinking, why are they going to actually ask about the business? And what I didn't realize at the time was that there is a philosophy and a school of thought that it doesn't matter what we're selling. It's more important who the operators are. And you can have the crappiest thing to sell, but if you have savvy operators, they're going to find a way to sell it. So that was sort of like a little nugget of information that I learned along the way. And then I realized, oh, that's why they don't care. They care. Like they just want to know that we can sell.
Well, and it was a storied institution in, as far as real estate went in the Seattle area. Clyde had been around for 150 years or something like that. It was a family-owned company, very much tight-knit. You know, they rented all the office space to Nordstrom and sold almost all the buildings to Amazon in that whole area in downtown Seattle. And the building that we were renting in was one of the oldest skyscrapers in Seattle and their first property. And so they saw it as their baby. And so that space had sat empty for, I think, 12 years. And they wouldn't rent it to anybody. I think it was 12 years. And you're right. They kept meeting with us and asking these questions. Why did we have to pitch it? Why do you say that? Why can't you just go to a landlord and get a space?
Yeah, I know. Well, you know what? I think it depends. So it depends on the type of landlord you're going to, right? You have your mom and pop landlords that they're just looking to get somebody in there and they're more excited about what your concept is and what are you selling. And then there are the bigger landlords that are developers. And so they're more interested in, can you pay? And so being a good operator is what they're more concerned about because you're not talking about a rent that's $1,200 a month. We're talking about rents that are anywhere from $5,000 a month to $14,000 a month on up. You know, if you're a bigger retailer, like
well, and a couple of our stores at the end did have those rent rates because we were in high-end malls, really good spaces. But I think also it comes down to what we wanted. So we had started a business with very little money and grown it. We were very cost conscious. We didn't want it.
Sure.
And so we would go to the mom and pops and we'd be like, this is what we want to do. We want you to build it.
Right. I see what you're asking me. Yeah. So as going into a developer, we pitched it and then we said, look, you know, we're willing to sign a lease for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Those are the typical, but the benchmarkers are like 3, 5, 7, 10.
Okay.
And it's depending on how long you're getting it and how many months will dictate what kind of tenant allowance you get. And that was huge because we didn't want to sink what was our living money. like our money that we had profited from the previous business into this building that wasn't even ours. We didn't own the building. So
Because it was a raw space.
it was a raw space, didn't even have a bathroom in it. And what was even more interesting about the space that we got was that it was literally a foot and a half beyond what was allowed to get to a public restroom, so that we didn't have to build the restroom in the store. And we were a foot and a half off. So we had to have full plumbing, the bathroom, everything. So we negotiated with these developers to do the build out. And that saved us an incredible amount of money.
That saved us 6 figures on that store. And we carbon copied that with every single store after that. And negotiating against some of the biggest REITs in the world. And we'll talk about that. So we start this tea company. We want to scale it. We did the math. We're like, if we're going to do this, it needs to be, this kind of build out by the developer, because we're not going to put money into that. We put money into packaging and marketing and all the stuff that you worked on. We didn't open our second store for a long time, right? But then we opened the second, the third, the fourth. We're talking to different partners. How do you think scaling a business at a time when social media, was in its infancy, how did we scale the business to quickly grow up to 7 figures and beyond? How did that happen?
So it happened very differently from the first business, which I can't even say. I couldn't predict it. I wasn't aware of it. It sort of slapped me in the face, because with KnitCrate, this was at a time when you could do the like my post, follow me, tag a friend, you'll be entered into a raffle to win something, right? That was something you could do on Facebook.
For free. You could post for free, right?
For free.
No boosting, there was no ads.
Crazy how wild that kind of stuff would go. And so we were able to grow KnitCrate's Facebook presence to hundreds of thousands of people. It was insane. And then when we found ourselves just a few years later in trying to do the same thing with Steepologie, which was the name of the tea company, everything had changed. All the marketing structures had changed. Everything. So it cost money to post. You had to have a separate business page to post. You had to have like all these different rules, and it became like this very complicated web and world of advertising. And when you're tight with your budget, that can get very expensive very fast. So what was interesting about Steepologie is that our location really dictated our success in the beginning, because unbeknownst to us, we were going to become a cult following. And this is like what they say, location, right? We weren't on the prime corner. We were on the edge of the prime corner, and we were a hop, skip, and a jump from Amazon's headquarters. And
And Nordstrom.
And
Pike Place Market.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we all of a sudden had this slew of groups of Amazon would come in, and there was 1, there was 2, there were 7, there were 10, there were 12, and the groups would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, the different companies, all of them would talk to each other, and we started to maintain this following.
Was there a product that built that following?
I was about to talk about that, and it was the steep,
the endless
steep. And what it was that we decided to import. This was our first sort of attempt at importing. And it was to import a beautiful glass tumbler. We had a wood one, a bamboo one, and a glass one. And we had them laser etched with our name. And the idea was that they would buy the tumbler, and we harkened back to our subscription-based platform history. And we said, if you sign up for a monthly fee, you get to come in once a day, every single day, and choose a different teas. And that took off like wildfire. You would walk down the streets of downtown Seattle and see people walking around with our endless tea
And they
tumblers.
bring their friends back in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the time that we instituted the endless steep, you could not get that tumbler unless you joined endless steep. So people would join it just to get a tumbler, which was crazy. I will say again, we had no business plan with that business. Had we had a business plan with that business, we would have never been able to be so nimble because we bolted on and tried so many different facets of tranches, call it what you will, in that business to try and figure out what would make it tick, what would make it grow. And so we bolted on iced tea, excuse me, to the menu. We bolted on in that particular store, the downtown Seattle store, everything from small food empanadas to waffles to yogurt cups to everything we could try to figure out what would make it flow better. And so it was sort of interesting seeing that sort of grow and how we kind of took that concept and then tried to, replicate it in other stores.
Interesting.
So we have currently 5 stores. We also have an online presence as well in wholesale. Our first store in downtown Seattle. Our second store is in Honolulu, Hawaii in Ala Moana Mall by Target. Our third store is over in South Center Mall. Fourth store, Alderwood Mall. And then our newest is in Fremont. We have more stuff in the works, so a lot less like your typical, more commercial tea shops that we've all heard of before that only have like 60 or 70 and everything's behind the counter and you have to ask somebody to reach something or smell. We've created something where people come in, you can roam our store, it's categorized by tea time, you can smell what you want to smell. Nobody's going to bother you unless you want a little bit of tea education, which all of our people are very well versed in the tea education, and we'd like to see ourselves that way. More like a tea education. We're here to help. We're here to guide you. We don't care if you even buy anything that day. Come in, grab a cup of tea. You can choose anything you like. They fly off the shelves, and we were very short-handed during the holidays of those, but we're working on that. So,
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
That's Andrea Racer from Steepologie. Go out and check out their shops.
Galleria in Houston, store in Austin, Indianapolis.
And it's honestly, in opening the other stores in different regional locations, it's where you really earn your brownie. Because you don't understand as an operator how different regions are going to dictate the success and failure of different products. Same product in every store.
Interesting. Right.
Way different reception, right? From region to region. For example, when we were making iced tea in the States, we used half the amount of Belgian beet sugar in them that we used in Hawaii because they like their drinks way sweeter. So we had really planned for the amount of Belgian beet sugar, which came in 50-pound bags that had to be shipped.
Yes.
We had not planned for the shipping costs to ship, I think, even 3 times the amount that we sent to other stores over there because that's in Hawaii, right? So little things like that. In certain regions, one tea wouldn't do so great, but another region it did, and taste profiles are different. And so one of the greatest challenges in having multiple locations is understanding sort of that flow, that supply chain management system. And okay, we've got to funnel this amount to that region, but we're going to funnel this amount to that region, and that sort of ebb and flow in order to continue the level of profitability. And I think that had to have been one of the biggest challenges before, of course, COVID hit.
Yes, I remember that. And it was interesting because we would open stores and it would take a while, about 2 years to get to that top level of sales. And so our Seattle store, we negotiated very low rent. I think it was 4,000 and we got it up to 40,000 a month in sales. But then our store in Hawaii, I think the rent was 16,000 and sales were in the beginning barely that, if that. And then on top of that, you had all the shipping costs, you have your product costs, you have marketing.
There's just a
Labor.
different, it's a regional, you have to be ready. There are certain locations, nobody warns you. Nobody warns you. And you go into regional areas that are culturally very, I guess I could use the word bubble again, that are very sort of like bubble in nature. The Hawaii is one of them, where you better have product labeled Hawaii. You better have product from that region. You better have product packaged to look like it's giftable, because most people that come in and out of there are traveling. You better have it in travelable sizing so that it can be on a plane and survive not customs, but going through the airport and not being seized because, it's a food product or this, that. There's so many things that you have to think about when going to different regions that nobody really prepares you for. And you know what? A lot of people would say that's common knowledge. Not really.
Right.
Not really. When you're opening stores and you're excited and you're just thinking, okay, well, you just don't.
Well, yeah, and you think it's a state. We're at Alameda Mall, the largest open air mall in the world with a lot of tourists. How much of a difference can it make? But it did. And we did all of those things. We sourced the Monica honey. We sourced the Manuka honey. We sourced that special tea.
Yeah, the special tea.
That was really tough to get from the Big Island. We did the unique thing with the churros on the tumbler.
But again, all of that is cost you're just not prepared for at the time, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute. Like this is the budget at this store. Holy cow. I need to budget X, Y, and Z for that. It's just the little things that go into business like that you're not prepared for.
So that's the retail side. We also had online, which did very well. We used our online experience in our warehouse to distribute online orders as well as to the stores, first in Seattle, and then we moved the warehouse to Texas. Talk to me. We're still pre-COVID. What were the plans to grow the business from a partnership perspective? What kind of companies were coming at us with partnership, and what did that look like pre-COVID?
Well, I think there were a number of facets of people coming to us. So about a year into opening our business, Starbucks decided to close all the Tijuana's down. And so that freed up a lot of empty spaces in the malls that they're previously tea operators. So we had other REITs coming to us with all these package deals for stores that, and that's a wine and dine game. That could be a whole nother segment. That is a whole nother issue that turned out to be a nightmare. But that being said, we had Nordstrom that was coming at us for a deal in some of their flagship locations, possibly in their deli. We had a deal with Amazon, an exclusive deal for their corporate office to serve their employees.
We cut off all of our wholesale offering. Andrea's driving.
I look tired. I'm so tired.
We've had
Amazon thing. I'm exhausted.
We've had some long days lately. The reason we're doing this with Amazon, we cut off all of our wholesale because we wanted to make sure our stores were stocked. We were having issues with all the wholesale orders coming in and not being able to stock the stores and our online and app offering. But we wanted to partner with Amazon, partly because it's Amazon, but also they were the only company, whatever you think Amazon is, it is people who supported us during COVID, right? So our first store was downtown Seattle, just a couple of blocks from the Amazon spheres and from Amazon's headquarters and all their first buildings. And the city of Seattle didn't support us, didn't do anything except charge us taxes and fees as usual during the shutdown. And the federal government was kind enough to give us a little bit of debt. But Amazon stepped up and they had 2 rounds of grants. And so they gave small businesses down in that corridor money, right, to pay our rent, to pay our employees. And so we applied twice, and I think the total they gave us was like $10,000.
Actually, I think it was closer to 15.
It was a $15,000, which in the big scheme of things isn't a lot, but it meant a lot at the time. We were completely shut down for almost 3 months, and we didn't know what was in store. So Amazon stepped up to the plate. So we were honored when they came to us to do it, and we were more honored to do it after COVID. knowing that they stepped up and cut checks when they didn't have to. Thank you very much, Amazon. And we're hopeful to get some good analytics out of this so that we can see, whether we do this Steepologie tea cafe offering. Thanks, guys. All right. Always day one in Jeff's world. Let's see what we got. Thank you, sir. Oh, this is beautiful. I love this thing and how it's all lighted up. Look at that. So cool. That's a good hint.
We've got a little ladder in the back too.
Perfect.
Right, guys, we are here at Karma Cup Cafe inside Amazon's new Bellevue, Washington building.
Can't get what?
Look at that. That is so cool. We watched them put this thing up. Beautiful. So there's going to be like light food here. This is going to have all our teas, or the 57 teas Amazon selected. And over here as well, so people can smell the sniffer jars, pick the teas. Beautiful.
Snapchat as well as a partnership. We had Bumble for the partnership. We had, it was just, we had some heavy hitters that were coming our
we
way.
had Google, we had Convoy, we had Microsoft. You went to the Redmond campus. There was a lot that we were doing, and then the world stopped
Overnight.
Yes.
It is such an incredible memory and experience, because it's like seared into my mind when all of a sudden the world stopped.
So talk us through this. So when COVID hit, what was the moment you thought this may take us down?
The first shocker was, of course, the news that we were under a curfew in the city and that all non-essential stores needed to be shuttered. And I just remember thinking, how are we going to pay the bills? How are we going? Because when I found out that landlords still wanted payment for the leases, regardless of the stores being shut down, we didn't have that capital in reserves to float that. And
You had 6 figures a month, and then all of a sudden your sales stop because
everything stops. And then what compounded the trauma of the issue was that you had your big entities coming out and saying, we're, furloughing and still paying our employees, and we're giving them benefits, and we're doing all this. Well, we couldn't do that. We weren't big enough. We looked big, but because we had a very polished look, but nobody really understood that we were still very small. And so we had to close all but two of the stores, which our revenue came to a grinding halt and like fell off a cliff.
And for context, all of the stores but 2 were in malls, high-end malls. And so the downtown Seattle and then the Fremont Seattle, and we lived in Queen Anne in Seattle. Those were the only 2 stores that we could keep up in.
Yeah.
But the Seattle store was next to Amazon and Nordstrom. Were they coming in?
No.
And then the Fremont store was next to Google.
Yeah. It just got worse and worse and worse.
All right, Seattle's police chief resigns and her department defunded. With law enforcement seemingly in shambles, it's no surprise months of unrest have made for bad business. Now, a local tea shop is closing its doors since they simply no longer feel safe in the Emerald City. Joining me live with what drove them to that decision, owners of Steepologie Teas, Andrea and Joe Raitzer. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. Sorry under these circumstances.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why don't you guys start by telling me what ultimately brought you to this decision? Joe, I'll start with you.
It was a decision made after a lot of deliberation. We'd been there for 3.5 years. That was our first store. We've grown it to several stores, and we saw over the past several years Despite SPD officers' best efforts to stem the tide of growing homelessness and violence and open air drug use, including shooting up heroin right in front of our store, City Hall, or Seattle City Hall, seemed to continue to hobble their efforts to make change. And it got so bad that in January of this year, there were multiple shootings a block away from our store, in which several people were murdered and several people were injured. And so at that point, safety, became paramount. And then when the Seattle City Hall started talking about defunding the police, we had to start thinking about closing the store instead of pressing forward.
Wow. Let's go ahead and take a listen to Carmen Best on why she decided to make this decision to resign.
This is not about the money, and it certainly isn't about, the demonstrators. I mean, be real, I have a lot thicker skin than that. It really is about the overarching lack of respect for the officers, the men and women who work so hard day in and day out.
Andrea, do you see that lack of respect for the officers that she's talking about?
Oh, absolutely. We have seen nothing but the Seattle Police Department's best efforts to help aid the business owners in the downtown corridor, only to see them basically being spit on and being treated very poorly, basically being crucified for the absolute horrific wrongdoings of some. And what that does is it hurts all of us. It makes it very difficult for us to function in our everyday business lives, to keep our team members safe. Our own daughter was assaulted in our store in broad daylight. SPD at that time was swift to arrive and to help us with that situation. But it's our other team members that are now telling us they will not work in the downtown corridor. You can't keep your doors open if you can't keep team members there that feel safe. It's an absolute liability, and it's ethically wrong.
I know you have a couple of other locations and another one that was set to open this fall. Joe, what is your plan from here? And those employees who are no longer going to be working at this location, will they go to other locations?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate enough to transfer those employees to other stores in the surrounding area. So fortunate for that, as well as our online platform, our online orders at our warehouse. So we're using them there as well. We were set to open 2 more stores actually in Seattle, one in Capitol Hill. And you know what happened there with CHOP and Seattle City Hall allowing that to happen. And then also in Pioneer Square, which is another area in Seattle that has just slowly declined. And in the past couple of months, it's just been a complete falling off the cliff.
Wow. Well, we're sorry.
To open in, yeah.
Not as of now. We will not be opening in the downtown area at all. Also, other businesses have affected us in that they fled as well. Safety being one of those concerns. We lost Bed Bath & Beyond on our block. We lost Macy's on the other side, and countless other large businesses that helped with the foot traffic to drive people and tourists to our store.
Well, we're sorry to talk to you under these circumstances, but for those interested, if they want to support your business, you offer over 300 fine loose leaf tees and accessories, which sounds fantastic. Andrea and Joe, thank you very much for joining us and telling your story. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Unrest and violence continues in cities like Seattle as the pandemic continues to squeeze hardworking people who are just trying to make a living. So what do small business owners need to hear and see from their elected officials? We are asking Joey Rodolfo, co-founder and designer of Buki, and Andrea and Joe Raitzer, owners of Steepologie Tees. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning, Jillian.
Good morning. So we've had you all on before. We've heard your stories. You know, it's been a couple weeks since we've spoken. So I'm curious, Andrea and Joe, I know you have a number of locations for your business. I know last time we spoke, one of them, you were just closing down your employees. You were going to take over to work at some of your other stores. Have you heard anything from your leaders since then?
No, we haven't. There's a complete lack of communication between small business owners in the downtown Seattle area and our city council and our mayor's office. It seems like they're more interested in hearing and making the rioters, the protesters more comfortable, yet they're not interested in speaking with us. It doesn't take a whole lot to reach out to those small business owners that are downtown and they know are suffering and contribute to the economy in Seattle. We invest time and efforts into our businesses.
yet we hear nothing.
Joe Braitzer, I'll stick with you here for a second. Is there anything that if you did hear from your leaders, they could say or do right now that would help the situation?
They could resign immediately, and we could have an election for new leaders who actually care about the Seattle residents and small businesses that have built a vibrant city that they have done nothing but work to destroy. Short of resigning, there's nothing they can do.
Have you heard from any businesses nearby where your shop was located? Any neighbors who say they're thinking of moving and getting out?
Yes, we have. We've heard from a lot of people that are absolutely devastated. They're devastated by the fact that some of these small business owners aren't as lucky as we are to have the multiple locations, and they have one location that they put their heart and soul into. So it's very difficult to make that decision to just up and close or to actually be forced to remain closed because of the discourse going on downtown. What we need is we need new leadership, and we need new leadership fast. And that comes in the form of us voting for the right side.
Okay, Andrea, Joe, and Joey, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, we're hoping that at some point we'll talk to you and things will be better. But for now, we appreciate you sharing your stories.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you.
Of course.
And then you have the big losses. So in the Ala Moana store, we were given 48 hours to throw away all of our tea that was in that store. So that was like a loss of 75,000 just.
Yeah.
And then I remember thinking, we're not going to come back from this one. We're not going to be able to reopen that store. And so I started giving away everything. I think I gave the computer to a young girl starting college. I gave the big screen TVs to each of the girls' families so they had an extra TV. I actually told the girls, take the tea and see if you can sell it and earn a little extra money because I knew we could pay them.
Well, and to be clear also, we didn't do this. We watched on the security cameras as our employees and their family members came in to help.
Yeah.
To help
Which was
clear
incredible.
Clear everything out.
I couldn't even say goodbye to them in person,
Yeah.
which was heartbreaking because you
But
could.
they actually had their family members come help.
Yeah, they all.
They volunteered.
And that's Hawaii in general,
Yeah.
right? They're a very tight-knit community, and they believe in helping each other in that fashion, which was just incredible. Which is Ohana
Yeah.
family. We struggled really just to keep afloat during that entire period. I think again that whole period of our business could be a whole episode, but to run through just a few of the challenges we faced. Yes, we did get some of the COVID help, but that went right back to landlords.
100%.
And the landlords were also dipping.
Yep. We later
So
found out.
they double dipped.
Yeah, millions.
Yeah, millions. And that took its toll. We dealt with the port wars.
Yeah.
Which was not being able to really get our product in on time for the season because we were small fry.
Well, our iced tea pitchers that we ordered in January arrived the following January.
Yeah,
I think.
because
And it was like we
I don't-
just spent $70,000 on this, and then they charged us an extra $40,000
yes,
for idle fees and all
I don't
this
see
stuff.
all these weird
Yeah.
things. And that was during the time. I think there was a meme that was going around at the time that said, "Where's my product? It's here." It was like an arrow pointing to like a cargo ship in the ocean. And I remember also, being asked, "How are you going to pay for that 40,000 or extra?" Because the fees kept coming in to get our things released from the port. And I was looking out of the window, and I had a fully paid off Tesla vehicle, and we had very little capital left at that time. It just wasn't coming in. The recovery wasn't happening as COVID went on. So I sold that vehicle to help get those products out.
Well, and you have no choice because the customs officials have a list. And if you have a black mark on you, you can't import.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
we were a tea company.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So let me ask you, people talk casually about failure. Like, oh, I did this, I felt like that. But what does it really feel like to see something you built just completely deteriorate through no fault of your own? You can't make payroll, you can't pay rent. You've got the government screaming at you. You've got lawsuits coming because we had those as well. Again, through no fault of your own. How does that feel and how do you handle that?
So I think this kind of moves us into one of the darkest periods of our life and our business. And I don't know that a whole lot of people come back from it. In fact, I know a lot of people don't come back from it. And I felt like I was drowning. I felt like a failure. I felt like my entire world was crumbling before my very eyes. I didn't know how we were going to survive it. I didn't know how we were going to pay our bills. Um, Everything that we had been wrapped up in this business. And, we both jumped in head first because we had to. The business was growing at such a rate pre-COVID that both of us had to be on it. Otherwise, it wasn't going to do anything. And the fateful day where I think is all like this part of my life where it was an epiphany happened really is that I ended up having a mini stroke. And I would have never thought that would be. I had that mini stroke at the age of 48, I think 48-ish. And
That was just 3 years ago.
yeah, and it landed me in the hospital for 4 days. And I remember it being one of the scariest moments of my life. I just couldn't get a handle on everything that was happening to us because the business, the business couldn't survive all the bills and the calls on from the landlords for all the back rent from COVID and everything. It just wasn't surviving. It wasn't, the retail hadn't come back. A lot of the landlords, when you're in these spaces, are like, no, don't worry. Traffic's back in the malls. Traffic's great. No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
I don't know that it is now.
And yet you're being fed this line of crap. And honestly, being made to feel like you're crazy. I guess I couldn't take it anymore. It just got to be too much. And I believe at that point that when I landed in the hospital, that's when you looked at me and you said, I think you realized this can't cost us our life. We've got to figure out how to survive this.
Yeah, and so just for the timeline, I think we've been talking about filing. I don't think we had filed yet.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it was like 6 weeks later or something. And I stayed in the hospital with you for those 4 days and 3 nights, and it's just like not worth it at some point. And and you're right, there was so much out there that was BS, and there is a level of media control. I remember the year before being in our Indianapolis store on Black Friday, and they had left all the doors closed except for one, and they had news cameras because they were trying to make it look like there was this mad rush.
Yes.
And it was just a straight up lie.
Yeah. And that's why I said, we could have a full discussion just on COVID and what went wrong in business with that. But the fact of the matter is it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
The business went down because of COVID.
Yeah.
And the incredible struggles that went along with it.
And so from that, because we had signed some personal guarantees, there was personal bankruptcy involved.
I know that when the judge looked at us and said, I hate to do this to you, but I don't see another way out for you guys. And I think here's the hard part.
And that was in the business proceedings. And then he was talking.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things, because a lot of people don't realize something. You might have to declare personal bankruptcy for reasons that have nothing to do with your personal finances.
Yeah.
We never missed a bill on our personal finances. We never were behind on it. That's one of the things, even through all of our woes with COVID, we always kept up on all of our bills. And we never had a single late payment. And to be told by the judge, I'm sorry, there's no way out for you. You guys are going to have to do this. And for me to say, but we've never been late on a single bill. We're about to have the worst black mark on our personal finances ever. Why? Because a REIT was greedy and was taking us to court for an amount of money that was insignificant to them for hangover from COVID, was just abominable. It was just egregious and horrific and terrible, but something that had to happen.
Yeah, it was a multi-billion-dollar REIT, and it was over less than $10,000.
It was insane.
They pressed the case because they wanted to know that we had nothing left to give.
Exactly.
But that's okay.
That's okay. You know
That's
what?
okay.
What goes around comes around.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Fun side note, our case was quoted in the WeWork bankruptcy.
it was.
Our case was quoted in the big
Case
WeWork
was quoted in
bankruptcy
the WeWork
because we
bankruptcy,
fought and we won and we got that
on
included. Yeah.
But yes, so there were horrific stresses. That has been the lowest of the low. And I think what's even worse is when people, some of the closest people around you, fail to sort of understand the gravity of that, which makes you feel even more displaced. Which is, as a person who had been feeling the highs of the high because you think you're doing so great, everything's going so wonderful, and then all of a sudden the world falls apart, and then your world falls apart, and your world keeps falling apart, and you just can't seem to get above water. And then the worst thing that can ever happen to your finances happens, and then the very people around you that should understand don't seem to understand or understand what's happening. That makes you feel more alone, more misunderstood.
You learn quickly who your friends and family really are. Last question on this topic. Personal bankruptcy is by far one of the most stigmatizing things to happen to someone in America. What do people get wrong about it?
Then it had, number one, a lot of times that it has anything to do with your ability to pay, or or that somehow you must have been irresponsible with your funds. No, not always. It can have nothing to do with your personal finances. I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from it, is that personal bankruptcy a lot of times has absolutely nothing to do with your personal finance. And it's horrific. And that's when you start to meet other people that are like, I had a medical issue, or I had really horrifying, that sort of, that hasn't been rectified on the books. The fact that, it stays on your record for 10 years and a lot of times had nothing to do with your ability to repay.
Interesting. So now that you've been, started Small Town Rural, you've been at the top, multi-million-dollar exit, started another business, hit rock bottom. How do you define success after that roller coaster?
After that roller coaster, I had to really peel back the layers of who I was as a person, what was important to me. And I learned that guard your peace, because you need to make sure that you can make solid decisions without noise. And that's something I didn't do previously. I let a lot of other people try to tell me what to do. So I guard my peace. And that's very important to me. My family, my ability to be present. I was never really present with the business. I was always very distracted. And it's because I never learned how to properly implement management or teams. Now, granted, we had a business during one of the biggest collapses that we know, so it was a little difficult to hire teams at that time, but I was never present. So to me, success is being able to wake up and know that I'm healthy, that my family knows I'm there for them, that that I have the ability to put food on the table, that I have a roof over my head, that I can wake up next to the love of my life, and know that we take precious moments together with one another, and we don't neglect one another, and that you have to have side interests. You have to have things that make you get up in the morning. It can't just be your business.
Wow. I love that. Yeah. Having a hobby. I think in 2025, you lost almost 50 pounds. You got off the 3 blood pressure medicines you were on. You started horseback riding again.
And that.
And I'm going to share some footage of that because it's wonderful. Just last week, you sang the national anthem, or right at a political event.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming.
And
Again, getting back to those things that made me happy.
right.
Because
And I think you're happier now.
I am, and I will say,
And you're finishing up your MBA this year,
I am,
right?
I
Okay.
am. I think that if you asked me 10 years ago what would make me happy, all you had to do was look at me and understand what my focus was. It wasn't all the wrong things. I had, and just for, context, I had maybe 20 Louis Vuitton bags. I had extremely expensive clothes and shoes. I had 3 Cartier bracelets. I had a Rolex. I had all the things that you buy yourself when you think, when you're on your high. And
That was during the first business.
that was
It's
during
not why Steepologie went
right,
under.
right. But that was all during the first business.
Yeah.
We got this payout. We're like, oh, now we can treat ourselves to these
Yeah,
things because
yeah.
we got this huge payout. But at that time, that's what made me happy, right? And that's honestly what makes you chase more, drink more, like this, I'm gonna like all this stuff, because my focus was just so. But what was more interesting was one by one selling everything I owned of value in order to try to keep the second business.
Yeah.
And I remember that feeling of taking off my jewelry to sell it, to selling bags, to selling my shoes, my clothes, my car. I sold everything in order to try and keep that second business afloat and to pay legal fees and everything else. And so I would like to add that it's very interesting that now, in being on another upswing and being in very positive territory financially, that's the last thing on my mind. I don't pine away for buying jewelry and bags and anything else. I am putting my efforts into my creative outlets and chasing another goal, which is maybe one day riding in the Grand Prix for dressage. And horses are expensive. And so is training. And I would rather spend every last dollar I have on a horse and taking care of that horse and training and my MBA and then a piece of metal.
I love that. If you could go back to Andrea right after that 7-figure exit, what would you warn her about?
Oh, slow down. Slow down. I think that when we experienced the success with the first store and it just gaining so much traction, that we just wanted to replicate it over and over and over. And I wish that I had, number one, slowed down, implemented a better foundation with the business, found those core individuals that would help create a strong management base, and focused more on the concept than on just trying to replicate. So that's what I would say.
I love that. You shared a lot. I really am super grateful. I know this is not easy to share this with
Oh
people.
man, I could have gone on for another 2 hours.
It's going on the internet. It's going to be up there, and I hope some people. I know someone will gain from it, from our past experience and what we shared, and people will reach out. But I'm so grateful for this. I know this wasn't easy, and I'm so happy you were my first guest.
Oh, I'm so excited you chose me. I think you're going to be super successful. So,
Well, thank you. I love you.
Love you.
All right. That was awesome.